Good evening, yeah, it's 5 o'clock. Good evening, and welcome to Beware 30-minute reviews. I am Adam. This morning on Beware of Spoilers, I mentioned that I was going to do this episode because I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on with Marvel. Because in the last few days, there have been a few news stories that have happened, and a few of them are not the best. Well, one's, okay, there's the good, the indifferent, and the bad. So, we did an entire episode about the good. The good being the Wolverine, the Wolverine, addition to the Deadpool 3, which also got a release date. Now, because I was out at Walmart when the announcement happened, and I looked at my phone and I saw, oh shit, this is happening. And I looked at it that way, and that's all I saw. I didn't see the full scope of the story, I did see the full scope of that story, but I didn't see that story was meant to take the attention away from the other big story that kind of happened. That would be Blade losing its director. Now, Blade comes out in 14 months. Well, 13 months, because it comes out in early November 2023. And there is now no director attached to this project. I don't know if that means they move something up to take that slot. I'm not sure how that changes things. I mean, because look, I think two of the stories could be tied together in a way. The indifferent story could also be tied together. So, the director who had previously directed Mogul Mowgli with Riz Ahmed, you can watch it on HBO Max, I believe it's still on there. It is, what's it called? It is, it was a big get. And they have a cast, and they were ready to do production, and now, apparently, they are unable to hit the production deadline, so the director had to drop out. And it's not the usual, we disagree on the direction of this, and usually if you get to that a month before it's meant to go into production, that's kind of, not a great sign. Because it was supposed to enter production in October, so I get 13 months to make and do all that. Now, I'm not going to comment on the reported trouble behind the scenes regarding this movie, because that is one of the takes that I saw, is that the movie is not happening as it is because of production issues behind the scenes. And I've said it before, movies that have trouble behind the scenes productions do not get do not get the attention about that, while movies with that have no issues behind the scenes will get that disclaimer even when it was not the case. For example, the Snyder Cut, or Justice League in general, did not have reports of behind the scenes misgivings until we had seen until Justice League came out, and then it was something happened behind the scenes. Even going so far as when Zack Snyder left, it was under the auspices that his daughter had tragically passed, and that being what it is, I'm not gonna say that it's not it is a perfectly valid reason for someone to leave a movie. That said, I think that it is definitely something where it's the more we read about what happened with Justice League behind the scenes, the more apparent it is that, this was more, we're giving you an out. We're going to let you say that you're leaving for this reason, but, get out. It seems more like that, the further out we get from it, and the more information comes to light. It seems apparent that Warner Bros. Is not thrilled with Zack Snyder's direction, and all of that. Now, notwithstanding all of that, and looking at kind of broadly what happened with with that. There was no reporting, when Joss Whedon took over. It was like, oh, he's just trying to punch up the script a little bit and doing a few pickups. It's nothing major. Meanwhile, movies that had no issues in production, namely, the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, which is not a great movie. I'm not saying it's, it's great and it should have been, treated as if it's, Citizen Kane, but it was reported to have production difficulties all through production. And it just wasn't the case. The movie was produced without a hitch. It wasn't received without a hitch, and it wasn't released without a hitch, and the end product was not great. But, in terms of production, that was done. And we see this claim of production difficulties really only happening when the movie is led by women or by people of color. So I'm not going to comment on the claims that there are potentially issues with that going on here. And I mean, look, I'm always hesitant anytime someone's like, I know what's going on, I read the script, I know that we have X, Y, and Z happening, so you're welcome, everyone. I know that is the case. I just feel like this is a situation where I don't think we need to read tea leaves to find out what happened here. I think everything is as it's kind of expected, because I seem to recall this movie was supposed to enter production in July and then got delayed. Now, that could be because the script had issues. There could be any number of reasons that issue was that thing was an issue. But be whatever it is, the movie was supposed to, I remember reading the first reports that this movie was entering production in July. And a year to do full, production and effects on a movie is not a ton of time. So him saying, with the production schedule given, I cannot make this movie, is not an outlandish claim. So really, I can understand that. I can look at that and I can be like, okay, that makes sense. Where we get into the next thing is how I think this next story is all three of these stories are really tied together, because, number one, anytime you lose a director on a major motion picture a month before production, it's not a good look. And you can't just go and announce you have a new director this close without raising eyebrows. What you can do is you can mitigate the bad press by talking about something else, which is what, like last year or 2 years ago at this point, John Boyega did his tell-all about Star Wars, and then that week they unveiled the trailer for The Mandalorian Season 2. And it's like, oh, so you're just trying to distract, and more distract via social media, and how trends work. So you're trying to keep that out of the public eye by putting, that out there. Then there was the other story that happened last night. They're moving Armor Wars to be a movie, not a show, in an effort to tell the story right. Now, I feel like what happened was, the idea was, like, looking at what this could be, with the death of Tony Stark, and especially if they put this movie in that middle slot. I think there are 2 slots still open in 2025, which is like the culmination of Phase 6. They have 2 slots open. They have slot 1, which is February, and they have slot 2, which is like midsummer, I want to say. Because we know the May movie is Kang, the Kang Dynasty, and we know the November movie is Secret Wars. So they have those 2 slots open. I think Armor Wars could be the one in between. If that's the case, I'll be a little disappointed, because if that is the case, and that is the movie in between those 2, Armor Wars becomes it could be a Battle World movie, or it could be like Ant-Man and the Wasp. Which, again, I feel like that's the issue with Phase, what's it called? That's the big issue I have with the multiverse saga and them doing Secret Wars, is that Secret Wars does so much, and you get this fantastic ability to tell ridiculous stories, using, blended timelines and a patchwork universe and all of that kind of cool stuff. You have so many opportunities with that. And I feel like an entire phase between them would have been pretty cool, instead of one movie and then a few shows. That's just my opinion on the matter. I think that would be better than what they're doing here, which is, admittedly it's still cool, but like at the same time, what are we using this as an opportunity for? If you're not using this for what it is, I'm not saying that releasing, say, Black Widow between Infinity War and Endgame would have been better, or if they made a movie set in that time period during the period where everyone got blipped, I don't think that would have been better, like a better choice off the bat. But I will say, I think that there's definitely, with Secret Wars, you have, during that period, it is just so depressing because half the universe is dead, and it's all about people coming to terms with their loss and all of that. I feel like going into that and doing, a movie there wouldn't have worked, but I feel like doing a movie in Battleworld would have made a lot more sense. And I feel like Secret Wars really could be a 2-part movie. That I don't know how, if they're going to do that, though. And I don't know where they go phase 7, 8, and 9. What else was that I wanted to address with this? But I think that putting Armor Wars as a movie is indicative that there wasn't enough there. And that Marvel is very fluid in how the story gets told. It seems like, they're like, we need to do an Armor Wars something. It is integral to the plot of this that we have Armor Wars happen. We need that. We need to have Sonny Burch still active. We need to have, we need to have, who's the other one? Sonny Burch needs to be there. I mean, I would assume Ironheart's involved in some capacity. I would, wow. And look, you got right in front of me now, you get stuck in traffic as like everyone else. You would have Sonny Burch involved, and then you need to start in setting up everything in a more meaningful way going forward. I feel like what they're doing with the idea of doing Armor Wars is it leads to some interesting story territory, but it doesn't, I don't know if it would have sustained an entire show. Because I think if you're going to stretch out a giant conflict like that into 8 episodes, you run a risk. And I think that they don't want to put that level of money into a TV show. That would be likely very expensive. Especially considering at this point they have to pull the trigger on how they're going to do it, and at the same time they haven't seen how Secret Wars pans out. The other thing I was thinking, watching, looking at this, is that the Iron Man 3 made over $1 billion. Now that was in the aftermath of the first Avengers movie. That was, first Avengers comes out, and then the next one right after it, a year later, is Iron Man 3, dealing with the aftermath of the Avengers movie, and it makes a ton of money. But if they're going to do Armor Wars, I think there's a solid chance, if they're moving it to live action, I think Robert Downey Jr. is coming back. And I think it's going to be a Robert Downey Jr. or an Iron Man from an alternate universe. Because I don't think they resurrect Tony Stark. Unless they say he was a Skrull, which would be fucking ridiculous. But or a Life Model would be equally ridiculous. I think, what it could be. And I'm piecing this together in my head as I go. I'm thinking it's possible that Armor Wars is going to borrow from Superior Iron Man. Superior Iron Man being the run in which Tony Stark gives Extremis to the entirety of the entirety of San Francisco, and then once everyone gets addicted to it, he pulls it away and charges everyone $100 a day to use it. And it's a life model decoy of Tony Stark in a new suit that's symbiote infused, and that leads to a lot of interesting storytelling. Especially if that 2024 date that was tagged for an untitled Sony Spider-Man movie is Tom Holland's Spider-Man movie, fourth Spider-Man movie. Because that could be interesting, because Venom is now in the world. And I think that that's something that we haven't really focused on, is the symbiote exists. The symbiote exists in the MCU at this point. Now, the symbiote is multiversal. It's in a multiversal hive mind, but it's an interesting thing that needs to be played with. And I'm curious to see if this means that we're going to get that. Now, I mean, look, I think there's a chance that, there are two, fighting movies, like fight movies, that I think there are equal chances we don't get. I think there's, and they're marquee matchup movies. I think there's a good chance we never get to see a Black Adam vs. Superman movie. Well, 3 then. I think there's a good chance we never get to see a Black Adam vs. Shazam movie. And I think there's a good chance we never get to see Tom Holland versus Venom. And these are all movies that are very heavily marketed, very heavily, promoted. And that's going to be what these, I don't think it's ever going to happen. That said, okay, go ahead. You can't just go into traffic and wave and hope for the best. You have a directional, use it. But with these marquee matchup movies, I don't think it's likely that we end up with a fight between them. But I think what we can get is the symbiote being used in that suit. And then Armor Wars, the best way to do Armor Wars then is to have Tony Stark be the bad guy. In the same way that I've been saying since, I've been saying this since the end of, since the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW. The best villain for Barry to face off against that he hasn't yet is the Red Death, but the Red Death as done by Oliver Queen instead of Batman. That is hands down the best way to do this, because what you do is you would now have him facing off against his friend for years, Oliver, is now the bad guy, and it's a version of Oliver that has killed a version of him and took his speed, and now they are, and that is who he's facing off against. That is a great idea. That is what they should do in this last season, and it'd be a great way to, close the loop a little bit. Considering he came from that, it's about him coming out from the shadow, and there's a lot that you can do with that. And I think that if you're going to do Armor Wars, you can do Armor Wars with the return of Tony Stark, and have Tony Stark be the bad, or, you don't have to have it be Tony Stark, you can have it be a life model decoy. And then just, go with that. And I would love to see them do that. It would be a really interesting take. Because then you can go back, there's so much you can do with that. You can go back to doing douchey Tony Stark from Iron Man 1. You can bring in all the ridiculous ideas that you've wanted to do. And it plays into Tony's worst enemy is himself, and now we can put himself there, and then it becomes time for, a full-throated defeat of who Tony was at his worst by Ironheart and War Machine. And I think that's probably the best way to handle that movie. And especially now that we have the symbiote in the MCU, we have that, and I think there's a chance that works in one of the 2025 slots. Or it takes the slot that what's it called was holding, or it takes the slot that Blade was holding, and Blade gets pushed back. That's also a possibility, because I think that we have a very short timeline on Blade, and I have a feeling that they don't want to fuck it up, because they don't want to piss off Mahershala Ali, who came in and said, hey, can we make a Blade movie? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, you fucking won 2 Oscars. So, yeah, I think there's a lot going on here. I really would like to see that movie that I wrote in my head for Armor Wars, so I'm interested to see where they go with it. I don't know where they are, though. So we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back with more news as it happens. Probably not this weekend, though. Over on Beware of Spoilers, we'll be doing Hocus Pocus 2 in the morning tomorrow. I'll be watching it tonight. And we'll see what else is happening. I'm not sure, though. So, until then, have a great rest of your week.